Kyle and I went to an absolutely fantastic concert for New Year's Eve. We met up with a few friends, but they all left right after midnight. The bands were great, so we wanted to stay for the rest of the show. Kyle got a call from a good friend Nathan around 1 a.m. Nathan said he was at the same bar and wanted to know if we were still there. We were stoked, because Nathan never gets out of the house. He's a super cool guy and we love hanging out with him. He had his girlfriend with him, who I like a lot, and his friend Derek. I don't like Derek at all. Derek just gives off a creepy vibe. He talks slow and monotone, and he stares for too long and leans in too close. He is Nathan's pity friend. They were best friends for a long time, and Derek's family did a lot for Nathan during a rough time. Nathan will bring him along every now and then because he feels obligated at this point, but he has no trust in him whatsoever. Derek is also a drug addict. Anyways, we all hang out and have some laughs. Derek sits there being freaky as usual, just staring at everyone. When he would speak, it would be something off the wall and completely unrelated to anything we were talking about. Once he looked at Dawn and I and said, "I think it'd be really weird if you two made out." Okay, yeah, it would be weird. We ignored him and kept having fun. The bar closed down and Kyle asked him if they wanted to come to our house and have some more drinks and play foosball and Tekken. I was a little annoyed because he didn't okay this with me first and I was ready for bed. I wasn't that upset though. I know that Kyle likes to have his company. I told Kyle that I wouldn't mind if it was just Nathan and Dawn, but I don't want Derek in our house. I don't trust him. Kyle brushes it off and says, "What's the worst that can happen? It'll be fine. He's just weird." Well, when we were all leaving, we had to wait for Derek in the parking lot for the longest time. Turns out he was waiting outside the door of the bar and trying to get to any girl to come with him, bribing them with free pills. I got mad and said, "What makes you think it's okay to invite random people to my house?" He just laughed. We get to my house and he sits on the couch beside me. He keeps poking, and when I ask him what he wants, he just stares at me for about 10 seconds before saying, "What's up?" I started ignoring him. He continued to poke and even tried to tickle my feet. I wouldn't even look over. Then he starts getting phone calls from people asking for pills. I went to the bathroom and he tried to follow me in there. I just pushed him out and locked the door, and he continued to knock. After this, he starts trying to get Nathan and Dawn to take him home, which was about 45 minutes away, and it's now already 4 a.m. They tell him no way, and they agree that he was staying with them. They actually only live about 10 minutes away, and they both wanted to go home to sleep in their own bed. He didn't want to go to their house. He either wanted to go home or stay at my house. He started whining and telling me that I had to convince them to stay, and I told him no. He started to say that Dawn had drank too much to drive. The girl had 1 beer the entire night. When they were going to leave, Derek comes back in and says he needs to use the bathroom. Kyle is overly trusting of people and doesn't pay attention to weird behavior. I am the opposite, so I was keeping an eye on Derek. I caught him going through my prescription bottles. They were nothing but antibiotics, but it pissed me off that he was trying to steal from us anyways. I told him he needed to leave immediately. He then stood in our kitchen, refusing to leave, just staring at us. I said that they were waiting on him and he needed to go with them immediately. He kept staring and said, "Don't you remember that time I gave you guys a ride? Well, make it even. You either convince them to stay, or I stay here and y'all take me home." No way. He gave us a ride home when we had a flat once, and we lived 2 blocks apart at the time. We are not going 45 minutes away to take a weirdo home that's refusing to leave for reasons unknown. He kept saying that Dawn was drunk. Kyle speaks up and says, "If you get in a roadblock, I'll come get you." He says, "Well, are you going to post the bail too? Because we're your responsibility now." I am beyond frustrated at this point and told Kyle, "You invited them, now get rid of him." I went and sat on the couch. Derek continued to stand there and stare at Kyle. Kyle, normally passive, is getting angry and telling him it's time for him to go and that we aren't taking him home or convincing anyone to stay. Derek says that he's not leaving, so he has to do one or the other. Kyle finally went outside and got Nathan to come and literally drag Derek to his car. Nathan had apologized profusely and says that he isn't bringing Derek around anymore, which I'm thankful for, and thankful that we didn't allow him to spend the night, because who knows what he would have done once we fell asleep. I was invited to a party on New Year's Eve, and a couple that are my friends were invited too. Since the guy knew the way to the party and I didn't, and they live about 20 minutes from me driving, I gave them a ride. It was a nice party with 15 friends, and we spent the night okay. But in the morning, even though that our friend had told us we could sleep at his house and drive home when we woke up, we still decided it was time to go home. This was around 5:30 a.m. I drank only a bit of champagne so I could drive, and both my friends from the couple drank almost nothing since they were spending the next day with the girl's family and didn't want to be hung over, so we were sober when this happened. We said our goodbyes and got out of the house. We know that the area is known for having pretty sketchy characters, but the car was a 2-minute walk from the house and we didn't expect to get in trouble. We were wrong. So as we got out of the house, there was this one guy just standing in the middle of the parking lot, smoking what smelled like weed. We walk on the opposite side of the road of this guy, but he starts messing with my girlfriend. She's really pretty, so guys usually stare and she's used to it. But this guy starts making infelicitous comments to her, with her obvious boyfriend, my friend, that has his arm around her right there. We look at him, but say nothing since we are right next to the car when he starts walking towards us. So we get in and I quickly lock the doors and drive away fast before he can catch up to us. But since that town was unknown to us and big, we had to stop and turn the GPS on. After we do this, we get on the road, but immediately have to stop at a red light. A car stops right next to us, which would be normal if it wasn't like 5:45 a.m. We look at it, and that creepy guy is inside, staring at us. At this time, we started commenting that he probably saw our car stopped and was waiting for us to ride away. But we didn't want to freak out, so we just kept looking forward and kept driving, thinking we were probably overreacting and that this guy could just be going the same way as us. But as the drive continues, we get on the highway. So does the guy, and he is obviously stalking us. When I speed up, he speeds up. When I slow down, he slows down. I even pretended I was going to leave the highway in one exit and quickly return to the main highway road, and he copied that exact same move. We start freaking out, but keep driving as me and the girl's boyfriend try to calm her down, saying there are two of us and only one of him, who is very lightly high. We are not that huge. I'm like 5'9", 140 pounds, and her boyfriend is like 5'10", 154 pounds. And the guy, besides being tall, was really skinny too, and we were just afraid of how crazy he was, crazy enough to stalk us. 40 minutes of stalking later, we get out of the highway so I can take them home, but I stop 2 streets away from my girlfriend's house and the car stops behind us, making her boyfriend jump out of the car and me following him. I wouldn't let him be alone. We don't know how crazy that guy is, and I have a really heavy bat in my car which I take with me. It's forbidden to have this kind of thing in cars in my country, but whatever, I have it anyway for protection. As we start approaching the car, he quickly speeds up, making a U-turn and driving away, back for the highway, or so we thought. My friends take their stuff and say they can make the walk home. It's about 3 minutes, going between the buildings and avoiding the roads, so we say our goodbyes and I get back to the car and start driving to the highway to get home. As I make the U-turn to get close to the highway, I see that creepy guy's car waiting there, and he starts following me again, probably thinking my girlfriend is still there. Now I freak out a little bit more. I'm alone, and even if I have the bat in the car, I don't know what this guy has in his, so we get on the highway and I start driving normally, pretending I didn't see him. And the second I see two huge trucks in front of me, I speed up and pass between them. At this time, I'm driving around 87 miles per hour, looking at my rearview mirror to see if I'm losing the guy. My exit appears, and I take it. I get off the main road into a side road from where I can see the highway and stop there. I turn off the car lights and look at the highway, and see that guy's car get off of the highway, but quickly getting back on. I guess I really lost him, and he just got out and re-entered because the place where I live is the last exit where the highway is free of charge. I calm down and drive home all the way looking behind my shoulder. Nothing really happened, but my greatest fear was for my friend and for me after I was alone. A few years ago, I was 19. I'm a female, and I was coming home from watching the fireworks display on New Year's Eve. It was 3 a.m. when I reached my safe, family-friendly, nothing-ever-happens neighborhood. I'm from Sydney, Australia, and live in a posher and wealthier neighborhood. My friends wanted to call a taxi because we didn't want to wake our poor parents at this hour to drive us back home. Because of my stubbornness and insistence, we ended up taking the very long walk home. My friend Aiden was complaining most of the time. Guess you can't blame him. Rowan was just silent and compliant. I was cheerful. When we reached almost my street, we split ways. The guys continued on their very long way home, much longer than mine, and I continued on mine. When I passed a little cake shop, I noticed a guy across the street. I only looked at him briefly, but something in the way he quickly looked up at me, almost in interest, caught my attention. I hurried on anyway, because I'm usually paranoid about things, and 99% of the time it's just me being paranoid. I turned onto my street, which was much darker than I had anticipated. This was about 3:15 a.m., mind you. As I passed the bowling club and the oval, I kept looking behind me just to make sure. It was getting quite cold and dark, so I started feeling creeped out. But there was no one behind me, no one anywhere as far as I could see. I was halfway down my street where the road dips down when I noticed something on the path in front of me. I couldn't tell what it was, and at the last moment I stepped off the path onto the road to avoid it because it looked like it might be a dead animal. And as I stepped onto the road, I turned slightly and saw that there was someone behind me. They weren't too close, but they weren't too far away either, and I remember my heart leapt into my throat because I hadn't seen them before, and for them to have gotten that close in that short space of time, something about it didn't sit well with me. I couldn't see who it was, nor could I tell if it was male or female, because it was just a black figure to me. It was a very brief glimpse. I was scared though, so I whipped out my phone and started to call Aiden. I kept calling him, but silly Vodafone wouldn't connect me to him, so I tried to call Rowan, but he wouldn't pick up. I kept this up at least 5 times, getting increasingly anxious but not daring to look behind me to see if he was still there. I'm glad I didn't, actually. I think I would have really freaked out if I'd confirmed it. By that time I reached my driveway, and I hurried up it thinking I was safe. But as I was halfway up, I looked over my shoulder again, just really quickly, and saw the figure there. The way I explain this next bit is really confused and muddled, because on the one hand, it may have looked like he was merely passing my driveway, but on the other hand, I am much more certain that it looked like he was just about to step onto the driveway as if to walk up. And at that precise moment that I thought that, it occurred to me that he might be my brother Jonathan, because no one else would bother walking up my driveway. Even if some guy was following me, it never occurred to me that he would really go to the lengths of going up the driveway as well. I thought I was completely safe because I had the advantage of my house close by when he started following me. However, something about the build of this figure didn't seem like Jonathan to me, so I hurried on in anyways. My beautiful, wonderful, amazing mother had stayed up to wait for me, and I am so glad because she opened the door for me as soon as I knocked. I hate to imagine what would have happened if I had to wait for a while. I went inside, but I left the second door open and the outside light on because I thought Jonathan might be coming in any second now, but Mom was like, "You can turn them off. Your brother came back 2 hours ago." I did get a little creeped out then, but I just dismissed the thought because we are so quick to think we are always so safe. Closed the door, shut the light, and went to get a drink of water. Mom went to bed. I went to my room to grab my clothes and then went to the bathroom to take a shower. I switched off the living room lights. This is sort of funny now that I think about it. Before I took a shower, I replied back to a message from Aiden, who was asking if I was home safe yet. I demanded to know why he hadn't picked up his phone, and then told him that I was creeped out for a few minutes, but I was okay now. Then as I showered, I actually thought about that figure. I wasn't too convinced that it was following me, but my mind did teeter into wondering this or that. In any case, I remember thinking it was okay because I was safe now. Then near the end of my shower, I heard something at my window. It didn't sound like the usual creaking or bumping of an old house. The way I described it to other people was like the sound of someone resting their hands against the window to steady themselves. It sounded really unnatural, I know, because it got my attention straight away, and I immediately jumped to the possibility that there might be someone outside. And I know that only a really strange sound would make me do what I did next, which was to turn off the water and crouch under the window, hiding and waiting. I waited for quite some time, too scared to move for a few minutes, but there was nothing. So I gingerly crawled out, still too scared to stand up properly, and I switched off the bathroom lights. But then it was impossible for me to dry myself and dress myself, so I turned on the heater light, which is much smaller and dimmer. But as I did that, I noticed at the window that there were very small blue lights there that certainly never belonged there. The way I can describe it now, it was almost like a keypad of a phone lit up. I was so scared, but I switched off the heater light as well and backed into the corner, my towel wrapped around me, and I waited. It seemed like a long time that I waited, too scared to unlock the door and move because I knew it would make a lot of noise. And as I waited in pitch darkness, several blue lights came on outside the window, like a few. It became very bright, and they were moving it, trying to shine it through the window. Now that I think about it, was it a phone? I'm not sure. There were a few lights, but that did it. I practically bolted for my mom. I unlocked the door and went into my parents' room, trembling like a leaf and gibbering that there was someone outside the bathroom window. I was clearly very upset, so Mom ushered me around trying to find a safe room for me to change into, and Dad apparently heard the footsteps hurrying back down the driveway, and I am glad he did, because the situation feels so surreal to me now that I'm not even sure if it really happened. Maybe I imagined it all, but this is confirmation that it wasn't just my imagination. I was so shaky, I slid into bed and couldn't sleep the whole night until it was morning. And even when it was morning, I was still terrified, especially when I heard Dad leave the house and go into the backyard. So that's my lesson learned. Never walking home at night again. I'm even a bit worried during the daytime. We never did find out who it was. People wonder if it was the same person I'd passed earlier, but I don't know. My brother doesn't think so either. He says it may have been someone lurking at the oval who came out of a little hole as I was walking past the supposed dead animal on the path because of how suddenly they appeared behind me. Please don't walk home at night alone, girls. It only takes one moment for you to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it can go very wrong. This is by far the most creepy thing that has happened to me to date. I usually feel fairly safe in my town, But this one incident had certainly awakened me to the fact that no place is perfectly safe. It was New Year's Eve when my friend called me and asked if I wanted to go to the New Year's Eve festival at the beach with her friend and her boyfriend. Being the kind of person who normally just stays at home and does nothing special for this particular holiday, I of course agreed. Every New Year's Eve, my town holds a festival at the beach in celebration. Rides and games are set up, bands play live music, clubs hold late-night fancy dress parties, and at midnight on the dot, a series of firework displays are put on for the public. Normally thousands of people show up, so the beach can get quite loud and crowded, but it's still a pleasant atmosphere all around. Before hanging up, my friend Jess asks me if I will pick her up and her boyfriend Tyler on the way to the beach. She also lets me know that one of her other close friends is coming along and that we should go straight to her unit so that we can all walk down to the festival together. I tell Jess no problem and then get ready to go. In about half an hour, I'm ready. I don't yet have my license, so I asked my dad if he would pick up my friends and drop us all off. He agreed. It only takes about 3 minutes to drive to my friend's place, and then a further 10 minutes to drive to my other friend's unit. My other friend Haley lives in a small 2-bedroom unit with her mother. The unit is right next to the beach and only takes around 5 minutes to walk down to where the festival takes place. When we arrived, she was already outside waiting for us, standing on the balcony and enjoying the sunset. We all file out of the car, making sure to thank my dad for dropping us off, and then head upstairs to greet Haley. We all hug and begin to catch up as we hadn't seen each other for a couple of months. Graduation, work, and life got in the way. We all headed inside for about 10 minutes to grab a drink and catch up a bit more. Haley's mother came out and talked to us for a bit as well. At this point, the sun had almost well and truly disappeared, and so we decided this was the perfect time to head down to the festival. The walk down to the beach was pleasant. It was a warm summer night. There was a cool breeze to ward off the heat, and the whole area smelled of cotton candy, buttered corn, and warm donuts. We spent the first few hours going on rides together, and then we went out and bought some food and sat on the sand to eat. So far the night was amazing, as usually whenever I went out with friends there was always a parent with us. No parents this time. It felt great. It felt like freedom. After eating, we went up to the stage where the live bands were playing and danced for about an hour. There were plenty of classics being played, such as YMCA, Time Warp, and various hits from Grease. All in all, it was a really fun time. After an hour of dancing to the music, the four of us decided to head back to Haley's unit for a drink of water, as we had spent all of our money. At this point it was well and truly dark, around 11 o'clock, and the heat of the day had subsided to a pleasant warmth. We walked along the path merrily, saying Happy New Year to every passing group or cop. A few partygoers on the 4th floor of an apartment complex shouted, "Hope you have an epic New Year," drunkenly at us. We laughed and wished them the same. As we walked further away from the crowds and the noise, the light grew less and less. There aren't many street lights near my friend's unit, and we were soon engulfed in a soothing darkness with only the moon to light our way. It was at this point that I, for some reason, began to feel uneasy. It was too quiet for my taste. You know that feeling you get when you're being watched, or at least think you're being watched? That exact feeling washed over me, and I subconsciously moved to walk in between Haley and Tyler instead of walking on the outside of the group. I shrugged off that feeling after that, attributing it to the fact that perhaps my ears were just used to the loud noises of the festival. They were, after all, ringing a bit. We ran into another group of people we knew from school along the way, and the feeling was completely forgotten. I had missed these people after graduation and immediately struck up friendly, lighthearted conversation. We parted ways as we made it to Haley's unit block and climbed the stairs to her unit. Haley's mother and the mother's boyfriend greeted us upon arrival, and we all got a drink of water from the refrigerator before relaxing together on the couch. We were all a tad worn out at this point, and the fireworks weren't for another hour, so we decided to chill at the unit and head down to the beach at around 11:45. We all joked around and had a snack, and then Haley asked if she can sleep over at my place. I ring my folks, check if it's okay with them, and they give me the okay. My parents love having Haley over. She's a very well-mannered person and likes to help out where she can. At 11:45, we all leave the unit and begin heading down toward the beach. We only get a minute down the road before Haley says that she has forgotten her pain medication for her bad knee, which she is supposed to take before bed. At this, Jess seems to be a little annoyed, but reluctantly agrees that we should go back so that we don't have to make another trip back to her place at the end of the night. We head back, and the whole way Jess seems a little distant, like her mind isn't on the conversation at hand and she's focused on something else. I'm the most quiet and observant one of the group, so I notice her silence pretty quickly since usually she's a big chatterbox. I ask if she's alright and she replies with, "Of course," and so I simply leave her to her thoughts. After retrieving Haley's pain medication, we head back out again. This time Jess suggests we walk on the other side of the road where it is more well lit and there are parents with their children on the playground. We think nothing of it and agree, as both Haley and I have poor night sight and a bit more light would be rather welcome. When we are halfway across the road, Jess mutters to us, "Don't look behind us." My first thought is that maybe there is a drunk with their pants down taking a piss against the wall or something, but then Jess adds, "Walk faster." I begin to feel uneasy and immediately obey her request, knowing that whenever Jess seriously tells us to do something, it's usually for a good reason. None of us look back, despite that nagging human instinct to look. I trust Jess. When we are across the road, I ask Jess what is wrong and what has her so on edge. She replies to me, "There's 3 guys in black hoodies following us. I recognize them from earlier." Earlier? I think to myself, puzzled, and then Jess explains that she saw those same 3 men. They had to be men, they were tall and bulky, when we came to the unit for water earlier. A chill runs down my spine at this, and I realize that my sense of being watched probably came from those men. What made me even more creeped out was the fact that they had waited all that time for us to come out. Unable to resist, I glance sideways out of my peripheral vision, and my heart hammers in my chest when I notice the 3 men. They are indeed rather pointedly following us, and they have their hoods zipped up all the way to their chins. This would not be so unusual if not for the fact that it was a hot night. There was no need for a hoodie or any kind of jacket, and they were wearing bandanas over their mouths and noses. I couldn't make out either of their facial features, and this scared me. Jess prompts us not to look and suggests we walk even faster. We do so, despite the fact that Haley, Tyler, and I are all tall and strongly built people. I should mention now that I am an 18-year-old female, and despite my build and reasonable strength, I understandably didn't want to tangle with 3 big, unknown men dressed in all black with bandanas covering their features. It crossed my mind that they probably thought we were good targets. Jess was short and thin. They most likely heard that Haley needs pain medication. I walked with an obvious limp as I have arthritis in my right knee, and Tyler had his hands full, being the pack mule as they call it. Despite Jess's instruction, I can't help but give the occasional glance at the 3 men, and of course they continued to follow us. They had even increased their pace to nearly match ours and kept looking over at us. I think they meant to intimidate us, as they made it quite obvious that they were staring at us. I ceased to look after realizing they could probably tell I was keeping an eye on them, and instead opted to use my keen hearing to make sure they stayed across the road. I wasn't fond of this, as they could have had a knife or gun or anything if they had suddenly sprinted at us and I wouldn't be prepared, but I didn't want to provoke them by staring. I am not a fast runner, and my stamina leaves much to be desired. At this point the path ends and gives way to bushes and shrubs. The bushland is quite easy to go around, but doing so would mean moving closer to the unknown men following us. None of us wanted to do that, so we all make an unspoken agreement to take a shortcut through the bushes. The bushland doesn't go on for very long, and would take us straight to the festival where we could quite possibly lose these men. We head into the bushes, taking care to stay together and watch for snakes, as summer's the season when snakes like to come out most. Especially at the Beast, it's Snake City. About halfway through, we all recognize the sound of dried grass and leaves crunching underfoot. Then we hear rapid and heavy footsteps. We all broke into a sprint, not daring to look back at this point. We didn't have to look to know these men were chasing us, and their confidence at going after 4 fully grown teenagers pretty much assured me that they were armed with weapons of some sort. We were not armed with anything, and quite frankly, we were all so spooked that we couldn't think straight. Our only instinct was to run as fast as possible. We made it out of the bushland together, raced across the car park, and slowed to a jog when we reached the crowds. We didn't stop, but as we steadily slowed to a hurried walk, I looked over my shoulder and recognized the 3 unknown men lurking across the car park. Moonlight glinted off the surface of a metallic object in the taller one's hand, and I immediately fell ill. We hurried down to where the biggest crowd was, gathered on the sand in preparation for the fireworks. Picking a spot between 2 large groups, we settled down and caught our breaths. Funnily enough, all 4 of us have asthma, which we often joke about, saying that we found each other and bonded because of it, and we were all panting quite heavily. Tyler and I have it a bit worse than Haley and Jess, and you could hear us wheezing as we panted. Soon the fireworks started, and we had all calmed enough to somewhat enjoy them, although the unknown men were still in the back of our minds. Our original plan had been to leave before the fireworks were finished so that we could avoid the big crowds, but instead we opted to leave with the crowds. We walked down the road to the bigger car park where my dad was going to pick us up, making sure to stay around people. When we reached the car park, I called my dad, and he said that he would be there to pick us up in around 10 minutes. After hanging up, I sat on the side of the path with my friends and waited. 5 minutes passed, and, bored, I decided to look around as there were still many bustling crowds making their way to their cars. There was a bit of a traffic jam too, as many cars were trying to leave at the same time. I looked across the road and realized with a jolt that 3 men in the black hoodies were there, half hidden behind a tree where there was no light. Even though I couldn't see their eyes, I could tell they were staring right back. They knew I'd spotted them. The taller one discreetly showed his knife, waving it a little as if to taunt me. Then he raised it to his throat and made a slow mock slicing motion. I quickly told my friends and we moved to a different spot, making sure to stay in the light and stay in sight of people. My dad arrived soon after, and we all quickly climbed into the car. None of us spoke a word of what happened, and since then I haven't had any issues with anyone following me or my friends. It still gives me the creeps though. Whoever those